US because you'd want to describe it in angular, the angular distance. You want to describe the amount of traveled angularly across the sky.
The sun traverses the sky at roughly 15 degrees per hour, no matter where you are on the Earth.
So why does London sometimes, a lot of the time, get less daylight? Almost all the time, get less daylight than the equator does, or Ecuador does.
Half the time it's more, and half the time it's less.
Because London is smaller than the equator.
It's not half the time, Mama. I talk about the equator, right?
The equator. London's a lot smaller than the equator.
The equator always gets more daylight than London does.
Yeah.
Because it's bigger than London.
When you say more daylight, do you mean the hours of daylight are longer or the intensity of the daylight?
Well, the hours of daylight in Ecuador.
No, the hours of daylight
in London. There is never one
in
time
London.
a year.
In the summer in London, you get more daylight hours than you do at the equator. We get up to 12 hours. We get up to 15, 16 hours a day in the middle and June. On the equator, it's nothing like that.
Yeah, because the sun is making that tight inner circle.
Right, so why is it then? Is the sun moving slower across the sky?
It's making a tighter
from east
circle.
to west in London when it's getting more time, daytime light.
Rumpus, do you know about twilight? How it's different in the north and the south? For example, if you're in like California, you're on the coast, and it's summertime for you, so the sun is up at the Tropic of Cancer. When the sun sets, the actual physical circle of the sun will be absorbed into the horizon visually, etc. So that'll be gone, and then there's the twilight hours, meaning after the sun has actually physically set, and then you have the daylight, the light, the blue sky is still lit up. You still have that. So that twilight amount of time is much, much greater for people in the north when it's their summer versus in the south, like in Australia, for example, when it's their summer and the sun is at the Tropic of Capricorn, they have very, very little twilight, meaning once that physical sun, is gone, the light is gone with it very quickly, which of course would correlate on being on the outer, like on an AE map type layout on the outer edge, outer rim, as it were. You're further out, the sun is traveling over more actual land. And so the twilight is very low, whereas when it's on the inside, it kind of lingers a lot longer. Are you aware?
We would in the UK, we would, and most of America.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing? The saying where Ruhif is in Australia, you're in, is it Melbourne or is it Sydney? Sydney, yes. So you're at quite a bit of low. So let's say Spain. So Ruhif, for instance, I think is on a similar latitude as Spain. So he would have the same twilight experience as someone in Spain. We're slightly north of that, so we're more like what the experience they have in New Zealand. So and where you're talking about where the twilight is very swift is at the equator, because the sun has effectively, because it's higher up in the sky, it has further to go. The angle change is still the same, but it actually moves in terms of the if you wanted to give it a distance across the sky, because the arc is larger, it's still changed by 15 degrees per hour. So what you've got confused with is what happens at the equator is different to the northern or southern latitudes. But if you're at the same north latitude as you are south latitude, so as I say, Ruhif and someone in Spain, or me and someone in bottom of New Zealand, would have a similar experience, as opposed to what you said, which was that Ruhif would have a different experience to us.
Your reasoning is wrong, though. The reason
that's fair enough. There's no need to be that condescending to Branch.
Yeah, I mean, your reasoning is completely wrong, bro. As to why twilight differs. The reason twilight differs is the amount of atmosphere the light has to get through.
No, we were he wasn't. We weren't talking about the. No, we weren't talking. We were talking about the relative differences. Gio was talking about the experience of twilight. Well, he got it wrong, but he was basically saying that the experience of twilight at the equator, or a similar north and south latitude, like me and Ruhif, or me.
I never mentioned the equator at all. So
I know you didn't. You talked about the different latitudes, and I was trying to correct you. You were just talking about that we would have a different experience at the same latitude in the southern equator, southern latitude. But you're wrong. We have exactly the same experience at the same latitude. So as I say, someone in Spain would have the same experience of twilight as Ruhif, and I would have in the UK would have the same experience as someone in the southern part of New Zealand, and the equator would be different to those two.
You know, Crack Villain does bring up a great point, though. You do come off a little condescending, bro.
And
Well,
there's no
when
need to
someone
be that
says something that's
aggressive.
completely contradicted by reality, it's very difficult to keep one's patience.
What do you expect in a room like this?
Stop being so aggressive, mate.
Well,
it would help if you weren't idiots.
Bro, I'm just messing with you. You're doing a really lovely
reputation for
job of
cool.
explaining things. You're really doing a good job. You're not being condescending at all. I'm just winding you up.
Oh, we're talking to me or Ruhiv?
You.
Okay, so if you're not, I'm not. Oh, you're joking. Okay, fine, that's jolly good. Yeah, I don't mean to be. Well, I do sometimes, but if someone just says I don't know, then my attitude is completely different. If someone says I don't know, want to understand, or have I got this right, my attitude is very sympathetic. I'll spend enormous amount of time explaining something. But if someone from a position of ignorance that contradicts science and what we know and observations then says this is how it is, I'm right, then I'm afraid I'm going to get a bit more condescending.
The interesting thing about this, Rumpus, is that you think I'm taking a perspective of contradiction. You've known me long enough to know what perspective I'm taking.
Well, like you said that okay, let's just make sure what I think Geo was claiming. I don't know whether you're making this claim as well.
Branch is just trying to get in with a troll. He's trying to throw a couple trolls.
Well, okay, so the point is, I thought someone, I don't know if it's Branch or Geo now.
Yeah, I'm talking about the twilight time after the sun sets in the north and the south. Yes. So
yes, and that's identical.
So you and I are claiming different things. So do you have any validation for you saying that it's equal? Because now we're actually contending whether the twilight is different. Again, what I'm referring to in the north, Tropic of Cancer, in the summer for the north, versus in the south for the summer for the south.
They're exactly the same. If you're in the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer will both experience twilight having the same twilight experience. Though, I mean, Branch was talking about daylight hours, and now he says he didn't really mean what he was saying, because I was saying London has the summertime in London in June. We have something like 16 hours of daylight, whereas at the equator you don't. It's less. So I don't know whether he was just joking now, just for a giggle. But anyway, now we've gotten to another subject, which is the experience of twilight at the same latitude is the same. So there's no difference between the experience in the same season. So
I'm claiming it's not.
I know, and you're wrong.
There's a difference in the twilight.
No, there's no difference. If you're at the same latitude, then the sun is moving at the same speed and you get the same angles. Go ahead, Ruhiv.
Has Geo been to the Southern Hemisphere? He's been to South America, right? I
have been to the southern regions, yes.
Okay.
Rumpus, though, irregardless of twilight, you know, there's still going to be times where London gets more daylight, and then if you just strictly want to count,
that's what I said.
Sunset to sundown, right? London's
in our summer we have our daylight hours are from something like 5 a.m. in the morning or 4 a.m. up till 12 midnight. That's so about 16 hours.
My point, Rumpus, is this: who the fuck gives a fuck about twilight? That's not even part of the conversation.
Well, Geo introduced it. I appreciate that, but Geo introduced that subject, and I answered him. Yeah, admittedly, it wasn't the same subject you were talking about, but he made a new point, and I just responded to it.
Yeah, that was what I brought up. Branch, I don't know what Branch is doing. He's trying to get in with something, but
there you go. London gets less daylight than the northern regions of the UK. That's obvious because of where London is. London gets. When I was there last, it used to get up to it used to go dark around about 9:30 in London, right? And then that would be dark. But then up in Leeds and further up, Newcastle and the like, they're going dark at 11:30. I've seen.
I can't believe it'd be that much. I would have thought maybe 20 minutes.
And if you go above the Arctic Circle, then you get 24-hour sun in the middle of summer.
That's right. And England's not too far from there, really. So, no.
Well, as the further you go north, I mean, for instance, when I was in Scotland, in Inverness area, it was, you get quite reasonable sunlight at midnight in the middle of June. And so, yes, as you go further south, and if you get when you reach the equator, then at the equator, if you're it has close to 12-hour days and nights. But obviously it wilders a bit in the seasons, but it's close to that.
Yeah, and I never noticed that until I became a flat earther. So that meant 53 years of my life, I wasn't aware that the northern regions of the UK was getting more sunlight in the summer than London, and I was happy with the 9:30 anyway myself, and I thought that was long. You see what I mean? So,
but only,
Well, yeah,
but only
you're
during.
just, yeah. So you're
But it's
saying
the
you're
opposite
ignorant. I
during
mean,
winter, though,
the rest
right?
of us globers, like me and Ruhif and others in who are globers, knew that all the time. So just because you've just learnt it, I'm afraid that, okay, you've had your own personal development. The rest of us knew that since we were about 10 or 11.
But Jin,
well,
it is the
hang on a
opposite.
second.
It's the
You
opposite,
would only
though,
know
right?
that. Hang on a second. You would only know that if you were living in the region. If you're living in London, you're not really aware of the daytime lengths in the other parts of the UK unless you
Yeah,
actually
I can read
reach.
books and I
Hang on
can
a
watch
second,
television
please.
programs.
Can
I
I
don't
not
need to
finish?
be there.
Can I not finish what I'm saying before you jump in?
Yeah, but your
Please.
basic point is that I can't read books. I'm
hang
not
on.
allowed
No,
to read
there's
books or
not
watch
a
a television
basic point.
program.
You will
It is.
allow
I
me
can
to
learn
conclude.
things from
You
books.
will
You're
allow
saying you
me
can only
to
learn things
conclude.
from being
You will
there.
allow me to conclude my point. You're
Oh,
jumping
such
in.
a
I haven't
point.
concluded my point, though.
Yeah,
So
but your
can
point
I
is I
please,
can't
may
read
I
books,
please
is your
conclude
point.
my point?
Yeah,
May I
your
But you
point
know
is you're
what?
not allowed to
point?
read books to gain knowledge, and that's a
May I,
stupid,
may
Hey,
I,
hey,
stupid point.
may I
Rumpus,
please?
He
Rumpus.
never said that,
Forget
dude.
it.
Just
May
let
I
him
He
please
finish.
did.
conclude
He's
my
saying,
point?
how would I know
I
that you
haven't-
would,
Is it-
I
the
haven't
further north you
concluded
have a
my
longer day?
point.
And I said, I read a book
I
or watch a
haven't
television
Is the
concluded
program.
my
shouting?
point.
Is the shouting
Yeah,
really
yeah.
necessary?
I haven't
That's
concluded
kind of my
point.
point.
though.
My point too, Rumpus, is
So right, if I
when
will
I
finish
started
my
talking,
point,
the shouting started
I
up.
will. Yeah,
What
I
a
will
And I
finish
do
stupid
my
point he's
point.
making.
Guys, hold
He's
on.
saying I'm
Let's
not
finish-
allowed to read a book and
Relax.
learn knowledge from reading
If
books,
it's
is what he's
possible,
saying.
can I?
All right,
Can
Rumpus, let's let
Can I,
Jin
please?
finish, and then you can respond.
God,
Please
thank
don't
you.
interrupt him. If you don't agree
How
with his
you.
point,
stupid.
just wait till
Thank
he's
you.
finished.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you very much. Right. What I was trying to say was, when you're growing up in London,
Oh,
you're not
Jesus.
taught. You are not taught about daytime lengths at school. You would have to look that up unless you're living in the region. Is my point. So me not realizing that the northern regions of the UK had more sunlight than London is only due to the fact that, one, I didn't check it up because it didn't. I wasn't prompted to, and I thought that
Jesus.
the UK. Hang on, I thought
Yeah,
UK
we know.
daytime
We've
was-
just established you're ignorant. The rest
you're
of us have
still
read a book on the
interrupting.
subject.
You
How
are
long do we have to
still
put up
interrupting.
this Jack
Look,
and Ori
moderator, can you do
story?
something here? Moderation, please.
He's giving his life story. We're not interested in your life story.
Well,
the rest
you
of
have
us
to
can read a book and
understand
learn the
that
stuff
there
from
are
books.
people, but you're interrupting. You must understand.
You're
that
making
there are
you're just giving us your
people
life story. We're not
No,
interested in your
can I-
life
can I-
story.
Yes, my life story is part of the truth of my
No,
experience.
we don't care about your life story.
I
It's
don't
not
care if you
relevant
don't
to
care.
science.
It's an explanation. It is
We're not
relevant to science.
interested in your life
It is
story.
relevant to science because
It's
I am
not
talking
your life
on
story
the
is not
scientific
relevant
thing.
to this discussion.
It
What is relevant
relevant
is if you look in
because
a book, you can learn that fact, and that's what I did.
It is relevant, Rumpus,
Oh, Jesus
because
Christ!
we are addressing.
Would anybody else like to talk about their
I
inside
agree
leg
with- I
measurement or their
agree-
girlfriend or
look,
something? It's
I'm
equally
agreeing with-
relevant.
Yeah, look, I'm agreeing with you that you do.
I've got
get
a nice
longer couple
garden.
times.
I've got some flowers
Hello?
in my garden. That's just as
Okay,
relevant.
nice to know about your garden. Nice to know about your garden.
Jesus Christ!
Obviously, your garden's going to be better than mine because you get more daytime. Okay, great,
Jesus
great. But
Christ!
listen, what I'm
No,
trying to say to you
you've
is
said
this.
your point. You didn't know about it. Now you do. Great,
What it is that
fantastic.
you interrupted me, and I'm going to.
Yeah, but you're making the same
Yeah,
point,
okay, what are we
stupid
gonna
point
keep
again and
interrupting?
again. We're
It's
not
gonna be
interested
bad
in your
for the
stupid
listeners.
point.
It's going to be
Your
bad for
point
the listeners.
has
you
no
stupid fool.
value. You're basically
stupid,
saying the hours of
impatient.
sunlight increase with the
Your
latitude. We know this, John.
it's
We know this,
deceiving
Jin. We know
You
this.
are
We
weak
all
because
know
the
this.
you are
shouting.
unable
Come
to be
on, come on.
patient.
My
Hey,
God, can
Hey,
someone
hey,
shut
enough
this
of
guy's
the
life story
shouting.
up?
Moderation
hold on,
3
hold
times.
on.
I have asked for moderation 3
Jin,
times.
Jin,
Yeah.
well, you can hear me talking. You can hear me talking, can't you, Jin?
Yes, I can.
Yeah? All right, then. All right. Now, one at a time, guys. Make your point,
Yeah.
Jin. All right,
Thank you very much.
try and make it concise, and then Rumpus, you can
Yeah.
respond
Bandy.
after that if you want.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with Rumpus at all. I actually agree with what he. All I was trying to say is that there are people in the UK who are not aware of that because he's
5
interrupting.
times.
Already interrupting. Can you mute the man so I can just finish what I got to say?
You have
Mute the
occupied the
fucker.
floor
You
more than
usually- look,
anybody
he's
else
still
the last
talking,
5
I'm
minutes,
talking.
and you said the
Rumpus,
same thing.
Rumpus,
Can
if
you
you don't
mute him?
interrupt,
Because you mute
he'll
me.
finish quicker. So just have a bit of patience. Breathe and have a bit of
And
patience.
look,
Come
why
on.
is it that you don't mute him, but yet you mute me when I'm
Jin,
if I'm interrupted?
Jin. All right,
Yeah,
finish
I'm
your
asking
point.
about. Yeah, thank you. Mute the man. What I was trying to say, Rumpus, is that I agree with what you've been saying. It's just that you must be aware that there are people in the UK who are not aware of the length of days up in the northern regions, due to the fact that they're not looking it up. They're not reading books. They seem to think that the daylight that they receive in London is the same nationally. Okay? That's what
Okay, so basically saying there are ignorant people. I accept that. People like you are ignorant and didn't know this, okay? So you're basically saying your whole point is you were ignorant of this fact and now you've learnt it. Brilliant. The rest of us who read books, watched, and now you're interrupting me. Now you're interrupting me. Now you're interrupting me. So your basic point is you didn't know a fact that you know now. That is not in any way interesting to anybody on this and doesn't advance the discussion, which I was having with Branch about the effects of twilight and with Geo on twilight, which was a more interesting discussion, and the hours of daylight. You've just chipped in for the last 5 minutes, just saying I didn't know this happened. Yeah, great.
Not only me, there's a lot of people who are not aware of this. That's
okay, there are people not aware of it like you. You've said this, we know this, we know there are ignorant people. What point? That's not a useful, interesting point.
Right.
Interesting point. Rumpus, can you stop saying what we think? For fuck's sake.
People who are educated, who've read books, know this thing that Jin's only recently discovered. We don't care about his life story and his personal history of discovering things that many of us knew when we were 10 years old.
You are annoyed by his repeating, yet you keep repeating things.
Because I'm invalidating the value of his point.
You are the same as you.
Ages. You have made
this.
Because
I'm making a good point and he's making a bad point.
Shut your fucking mouth. You are making it take longer, all right?
Yeah. All I was trying to state the fact.
Yeah, you said that. We're not interested in the fact you just said you're ignorant of something.
Well, actually, it is quite interesting that people
No, it's not, Jin. No, it's not.
It's quite interesting. It's quite interesting, I think.
What you said? Not interested in the fact that you're ignorant. I'm afraid. Sorry.
No, there's a lot of ignorant people. There's a lot of people that are ignorant of the fact. All right. If I may add this one point, there's a lot of people ignorant of the fact of the flat Earth, like yourself. You're ignorant of the flat Earth because when it all comes out. When it all comes out, I'd love to be the first one to smash your jaw. I would love to be, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I mean, you're just an ignorant yob. I'm sorry. You seem to think that your ignorance is of interest to anybody.
All right, guys, talk about the topics. Get off the personal stuff. Just start talking about it.
Yeah. I'm ignorant on certain aspects.
Of everything. You seem to be ignorant of everything as far as I can see.
If you want to say everything, that would be a baseless claim on you as you don't know me and you don't know what I don't know. So that's
I do know what you don't know. You've demonstrated you know almost nothing about science, and you also don't know what's interesting to other people. And you seem to think that we're interested in your life story. We're not.
Did you hear that? Actually, one's life story can be interesting.
Yeah, but not to us. Yours
maybe
just
not
a story
to you.
of
Not to you,
Rumpus.
Not to you, Rumpus.
Ruhif, for instance, has a much more interesting life story.
I've got no interest.
You guys, hold on. Let's just maybe try it.
Wait there. Let me clear the floor. Let me clear the floor because this is getting annoying. Okay, look. Yeah, Ruhif may have a more interesting life story to you, Rumpus, but let's face it, all of you twats are in the same fucking room talking, alright? So their lives have actually led up to the same position, haven't it? So let's carry on.
Another useless point. Well,
you know what? We're all on a playing field here, right? There's no better person.
Yes, but the rest of us don't seem to think we've got to explain our life story. I mean, I could go on for 5 minutes about how I learned something. It's not of interest or value. And Jim seemed to think we're interested in his life story. We're not.
Actually, I didn't go on. And I explained the point of how easy it is.
Anyway, can we move on to a subject of substance? No, we don't want to know more about your life story. Can we get on to a subject of substance?
If you can convince...
Oh, my God.
If you can convince Jen... we can move on to a better subject.
Do the moderating.
Let's talk about twilight.
We're going to talk about a subject. All right. Now pick a subject and talk about it. Keep the personal stuff out of it.
All right.
Thank you. And I'm trying to
Rumpus, just to carry on back what we were talking about with the twilight. Yeah. So my next question for you was going to be, in terms of that, have you seen or do you have any verification or validation of this difference in the twilight time in the North and the South in their respective summers? Or is it just something you've heard in the model and you're going with? That's my next question. Do you have any verification or validation of it?
I don't have a citation I can give to you
immediately. And where are you getting the information to come from that they're the same? Yeah, that they're the same.
Well, the Earth's rotation is different at the equator and and the orbit of the sun. For instance, if you're at the equator, and let's say it's at the equinox, then the solstice, no, equinox, sorry, and you're on the Tropic of Capricorn. So you have, okay, let's make the solstice, and you're on the equator. Then the sun is directly overhead, and then the sun has got to go from has got a bigger arc over your head from one side to the other. So it actually. The angle is the moving at 15 degrees to our hour is the same, but you can think of, if you look at the distance. So, I mean, if you want to try and think of some sort of a distance there, the sun seems to be moving faster because it's got to get from one end to the other. It's got to cover the same number of degrees, but it's effectively got a bigger, from your perspective, a bigger radius. Now that means that the twilight time, that means effectively the sun is moving more quickly. Now, you can still see the sun due to refraction when its physical size is just the top of the sun is actually below the horizon. Now that means that the twilight time is much less at the equator because the sun is effectively in the angles are still the same, but as it's moving across the sky, it seems to be going faster. But that means that the twilight time is going to be less at the equator than it is at a particular latitude, like for me and Ruhif.
Right,
so if you can work it out from geometry.
You keep bringing up the equator, but what I'm talking about is let's just, for simplistic case, you're on the Tropic of Cancer, and it's your summertime, so the sun is right above you at the Tropic of Cancer. When the sun sets, there's a twilight time from the minute the last little circle, the yellow circle of the sun, is not visible. Now you have to also consider, atmospheric effects and so on, because if you have different, if it's to test this, what I'm saying is that you'd have to test it on days that have a very clear, crisp horizon and so on, not where it's a bunch of rain clouds and stuff. But anyway, so compared to
which distance are you trying to compare?
Compared to being on the Tropic of Capricorn when it's summer for them, so the sun is right at the Tropic of Capricorn in the southern region. And
would that be the same?
You're saying they're the same, but that's what I'm asking. I'm asking, is that based on just the model that you're given, or is that based on any real life verification of it?
Well, I do not have an observation to hand, a citation I can give to you to say that someone has been to the Tropic of Cancer in the summer and Tropic of Capricorn in the summer, and the twilight is the same. But you can just look from at the geometry of it and see that those two experiences should be identical.
And if they're not, the way I'm describing, then what? What? Meaning because of course,
yes, if they weren't the same, that would be very peculiar. I mean, you could argue the experience might be different due to atmospheric conditions, as you were saying. But assuming that you could find somewhere, say in the middle of a sea, and you were looking at you're in a boat at the same location, so you're not affected by winds. I mean, you could have tides, I suppose, and currents that still affect the weather. But if you could have the same weather at the two locations, Tropic of Capricorn, Tropic of Cancer, then I do not have a citation of someone saying in those two situations that it's the same. But people who just from the geometry, we can see those would be the same. And people do talk.
I have to disagree with you.
And if they're actually different in real life, what would you raise an eyebrow?
Okay, that would be problematic. Yes, if you had the same weather conditions in the two places, the same atmospheric conditions, and the experiences were different, then yes, that would be problematic for the globe. Yes.
Okay, no trolls, Geo. Seriously, Rumpus. I honestly thought twilight is a function of refraction.
It's the amount of time that you're still getting light from the sun, but you cannot see the actual circle of the sun. So after the circle of the sun sets, there's still light in the sky. You can still
and that's why I say that it's a product of refraction.
Yeah, it is. You're right. Because
the reason why some places get more twilight than others is simply because of the amount of atmosphere that the light has to move through.
Well, that's the same. Depending on your latitude, that would be the. If you're the same latitude, you have the same amount of air to go through. Refraction is the cause of having a twilight. Because if you're on the moon, for instance, then there would be no twilight at all. It would just go from being able to see a bit of the sun.
Right. So when you talk about weather systems having an impact on this, we're talking about hundreds of miles of atmosphere causing this refraction.
No, I hear what you're saying, Brad.
We're not talking about localized weather.
I'd like to know what Ruth said just then. Ruth, could you just repeat what you said?
It's more scattering than refraction. That's why twilight exists.
And I agree with Branch.
It goes around you do get light coming round the curve of the Earth due to refraction. I mean, you're talking about the color. I think you're talking Yes, okay, it's a combination because the colour of it's caused by scattering. I'm not sure that that's the cause of it bending round. There's any effect of the scattering causing it to sort of creep round the side of the Earth, but it's the cause of the colour. Is that what you mean?
The reason you can still see, even though the sun is below the horizon, is because the sun is still lighting up the sky, which is scattering.
No, it's refraction. You could, geometrically, the sun has gone below the horizon. You can still.
I guess what's the difference between refraction?
The sun is visibly below the horizon. You can still see things because the sun is lighting up the sky. You can't see the sun.
Yeah, but yes, but that's because the still refracted sunlight hitting the clouds, for instance, or yes, right. So I see what you mean. So the blue sky, yes. So yes. I mean, you can argue why can you see the sky when the sun's gone down? Yes, because obviously, therefore, the light hits an air molecule and then bounces off and then to you. And obviously, if there's no direct line of sight from you to the sun, then it's got to get to you by being bounced off. Yes, so I agree with you about that. Yes, if that's the point you're making.
I think that it's. To say it's purely just scattering sounds wrong, but I'm not an expert on this.
I mean, so for instance, if you had a look at a laser,
you may have actually looked into it.
Imagine you were in a vacuum and you had a laser beam, a perfectly straight laser beam going past you. You would not be able to see it. And that's why you can only see something like a laser beam when you put smoke or something in there. And then, as Ruth was pointing out, the laser beam then scatters the light, and then the light's got to get to your eye, and it's got to do that by bouncing off a smoke particle. And then, similarly, the same thing occurs in the atmosphere. So for you to see the sky, so for instance, when you're looking at the sky, even in daylight, how is that light getting to you? How are you seeing that bit of that sky? And it's because the sun, even in daylight, the sun is hitting the air molecule, and then it's being scattered by it and making it look blue. If it wasn't interacting with the light, then you would just see the darker space. So the scattering, you've got to get light going to your eye, and it's got to go there. So it's going to go from the sun to something to your eye.
I'm just not sure if twilight itself, if scattering is the only cause for twilight and the hours of twilight. It's got a lot more to do with refraction.
Well, the refraction causes it to see extended time, but Ruh's correct that to see the sky, it's got to scatter off something for you to see it. It's got to reflect, bounce off. The light has got to bounce off.
It's doggy feeding time.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the sun is actually charging the gases to fluoresce in the sky, so it's a totally different modality than the way the globe. But either way, this is a little bit of a separate thing. What we were talking about originally is that, is there a consistent difference in the timing? Now, you're right. You'd have to take in atmospheric conditions and so on. But these are two slightly different things. One of them is the actual time. So, I mean, that should be pretty easy to verify, right? I mean, that's not even something that would, I mean, that could be done. Like, you would have to make sure that it's done on clear days. But if it's
you could probably do it from here. You could probably get the people like Ruhif, for instance. I mean, he's on a similar... I mean, I don't know what latitude so we want someone in the southern latitude. So we've got people like Ruhif and there are people in New Zealand. We've got Wolfie and a couple of other Australians who would be on the same. In fact, they'd be similar latitude to you, actually. What's your latitude, Gio?
I'd have to.
Well, approximately, it's 40 degrees or something.
Is that something everybody should know?
I think it might be 38 or something.
Okay, so let's just imagine you're at 40. So that Australia. So Ruhif, actually, let's go and look and see what Ruhif is latitude is. Go and just check on that for a moment.
Yeah, I'm like 39.
Right, so about 40. I think that's probably the same as Ruhif. So you too could probably do it yourself. So let's go and have a look at this.
Dude, Gio, you sound a little bit deflated when you said I'm 39. Like that was like a bad thing.
No, I just said 39.
Yes, I think you're probably similar.
So let me ask you this though. On an Earth that is like an AE map with the sun, the Tropic of Cancer, et cetera, of course that southern region is much larger amount of land and so on. And so you would agree that it would be likely that the twilight time would be different on an AE map.
Yes.
And I agree that it would be the same on a sphere.
Yes. Okay. Jolly good.
With considering atmospheric conditions and so on. So I think, there would have to be a fair amount of testing. Like you couldn't just do it one day, you'd want
absolutely.
to do multiple days.
Of course. Yes. Yeah, I can't.
Because I admit that I can't think of a way that it would be the same on an AE map. I mean, not one that I could really, you know what I mean? Like it definitely would be different because, and actually the sunsets in the southern region, I've seen. I mean, I have seen them myself, but I've also seen footage where they really look like they're bending off to the right. You know, like it really looks like it's getting smaller and the light is fading and it's like it's bending off to the right, which of course would be more the case on an AE map because that wider circle of the Tropic of Capricorn, that is making kind of a much more broad arc as it's kind of making that larger. Whereas in the north, it's just different because it's making that a more inner circle. Like it's arcing and anti-arcing. So it's like the inner is the arc, the outer. So there's a different arc pattern to the way the sun would be traveling.
And that's one of the reasons why we know the Earth's a globe and not a flat. So so Sydney, where Ruhif is, it's 33, minus 33. So you're plus 39. So it's not that different. So you too should be having a very similar experience of twilight and the sun going up and down.
You just kind of discounted what Gio basically just said for the last 2 minutes. And
sorry,
Gio
I was looking at. I was looking.
Point.
I was agreeing with him. If you're on a flat Earth, you're going to get a different effect, and if you're on a globe, you're not. I think we were agreeing on that. And I was just looking at Google Earth to establish the latitude of Sydney while I was doing that. Yes, I'm agreeing with you. There would be a difference in the experience.
Well, you know, one of the things that I know you've heard is the difference in the weather, the plant life and the temperatures in Antarctic versus the Arctic. So there already is a big difference, you know, in terms of that. The plant life in the north, of course, the sun making an inner circle there's immense amounts of plant life and animal life and everything in the north, even in the cold areas at a similar distance from the equator than there is in the south. It's like dead barren. So that there already is a difference in the north and south in terms of that.
The most luscious area in the world is in South America, in the Amazon, and in the Indonesian areas, which are below the equator. So I don't know. And there isn't.
Well, getting full sunlight isn't ample, is it?
But that's a good point. But I mean, that's still right in the binds of the Tropic of Cancer, Capricorn.
The temperature.
I'm
shouldn't
talking
be
about
making...
the extents, you know, of the inner and the outer.
The temperature shouldn't be really, the temperature really shouldn't be an issue. It's basically the clarity of the sky is the only thing that's really interesting. And that should be, and Sydney's right on the. I mean, you're not on the coast anywhere, are you?
I mean, I'm close enough. I could get there, but I'm not just right next to it. No. But...
Okay, right. So you and Ruhif are on similar latitudes, so you could compare. When the sun goes below the apparently goes below the horizon, and then how long this dark period is, and this is what's called this thing that actually Dr. Bob Sart's guy documented this, a belt of whatever it is, this where you have the shadow of the horizon behind you. That how long that lasts. You should have similar experiences.
Dude, I lost all faith in Dr. Bob the other day.
Right, and so if it's dramatically different, that like for example, the way I'm describing in the south after the sun sets, the twilight's very short versus, and this could be timed, you know, with a timer, and actually measuring that. Of course, it'd be nice if you had some equipment, you know, to measure luminosity and you know really measure it too, instead of just kind of eyeballing.
Yeah, well, just the time. Well, the time would be. I mean, you could take camera shots saying, "Look, this is where this band." Yeah, I mean, Dr. Bob the Science guy makes so many mistakes; it's just ridiculous. But he does get some things right, and he got that video about the belt of whatever it was, which is the.
Yeah, but what annoyed me, Rumpus, was like it was literally just me and Bob in his room talking, right? And he was talking about radio waves possibly causing interference, and some of the shit he was showing me that he was measuring and shit, right? I was like, bro, you understand that these radio waves are just photons, right? And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, yeah, radio waves are just another form of light.
Yes, they are photons. Yes, they are. Yes, I think he understands that.
No, he didn't.
I think he does. You must have misunderstood him, because I'm sure I'm not sure, but he's good enough to get something like that right. He does make lots of mistakes, but I would have thought he knows that
Dude,
radio waves.
I'm telling you, man,
are photons.
I found it hard to keep a straight face for the rest of the conversation, because after that,
Well, put it like this: I think he's got a better grip on science than you do. So I would.
I mean, Rumpus, you.
What is your rank?
The thing is about me,
Dr.
Rumpus.
Bob?
I don't let out my grip on science, do I?
How do you and Ruhif and Dr. Bob? How do you guys all rank in the Glober Society rankings?
Ruhif makes many fewer mistakes than Dr. Bob.
Rumpus, I would actually say, Rumpus, that I probably got a better understanding about science than you do.
No, you don't.
I mean, I don't throw it out there. I don't use science to prove fucking the Earth's a globe.
Well, the mere fact you are a flat earther,
I'm gonna have to agree with Rumpus on this one, Branch.
Yeah, I am a flat earther.
Well, there you go then. So I mean, you're disqualified from even participating in a competition about knowledge of science.
Branch is not.
I easily win that one.
Branch is a globe believer.
Is he? I can't.
Now therein lies the problem, right? That the scientific community totally shuts the door on the flat earthers, and we're coming with scientific evidence.
No, you're not.
We're coming with scientific proof. We're not coming.
I know, man. I'm just happy that
give one piece of scientific evidence.
I'm just happy that the tone of the chat calmed down. I hope that now that Jin started talking, Jin and Rumpus can keep this conversation at this level.
That's all. I'm just highlighting that point, that the scientific community,
scientific community rejects the flat Earth. Yes, it rejects it. Yes, because it's got evidence. We've got pictures of the globe Earth. We've got all the evidence.
There
is no single piece of evidence.
There isn't a single shred of evidence that proves
it's going off the rails.
Now, look,
all right, you guys, come on, don't go off the rails.
Anyway, we were talking about observations from Sydney.
Can I draw your attention?
Yeah, you've done it, Jim. You've drawn the attention. Yes, science rejects the flat Earth. We know this.
Live stream text.
Hey, Rumpus and Jin, you guys both agreed that you guys can keep text. Not getting fucking argumentative.
Please go to the live stream text, Rumpus. I posted a video. You don't have to watch it now.
Oh my God, that's the D Marble's an idiot. Yes, I just have the same Yeah, I've seen that. I think I've seen that video. D Marble's an idiot.
Well, let me just allow me to just articulate it without any interruptions. I'm only going to take 30 seconds. Basically, he's using Skype. He's in Washington. It's 12 noon. He contacts a guy in England, Northern England, and a guy in Australia. It's 9:30 in England. The sun has just disappeared, okay, from his visibility. It's 6 o'clock in the morning in Australia. The sun is just about to come moving towards morning, okay? Now, when you plot this on a globe, Australia is in the dark.
No, if you look at it, what you'll see is... No, listen. Refraction means that the light goes more around the Earth than just... listen. Refraction means that light doesn't just stop at 50-50. It actually, more of the Earth is illuminated because the refraction, as you hopefully know, or presumably don't, light is bent downwards, which means that you get an extra...
Light can also bend upwards, by the way.
It can be, but most of the time it's bent downwards, which means that it's curved around the Earth, which means that actually all the time... something like 55% or nearly 60% of the Earth is actually illuminated to some degree by the sun. And therefore, that's why you can get two places that are 180 degrees from one another, both being illuminated by the sun. It's all down to refraction. Just like we say that when the sun's gone below the horizon, when you can still see it, the sun has actually gone below the horizon due to refraction because light bends. So refraction is the cause of the effect that video is confused by.
Yeah,
right. Right. Hang on. I'm going to rebut that, and I didn't interrupt you, so you will not interrupt me. Okay. Now, so you're misinterpreting the video. First of all, there are three locations that are presented in the video: Washington in the US, England, and Australia. We plot those on the globe, which is everyone's got one of those at home. Okay. And now what we try to do is present the sun in the correct location at 12 noon in the US. UK, it's 9. But unfortunately,
we know what you're going to say. You're saying that we shouldn't have one should be in the dark.
You are
yes, we know that.
interrupting.
Yeah, but you're making a point. We understand your point.
Moderation, please. Moderation. I didn't interrupt him at all. So can you?
Yeah, Rumpus, he takes a little longer to go. But I mean, at least try to keep it somewhat concise, Jim. But yeah, go ahead, finish it up.
Yeah, hang on. I'm not even taking half as long as he took. Please time me. Even time me. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to time myself because I'm fed up with this accusation that I monologue and
Go on, Jin.
Get to the point, Jin.
Go on, Jin.
I'm frankly quite fed up with that accusation. I'm now going to time myself.
Jin,
so I know exactly.
Get to the point. He's waiting because he's muted.
You're doing it now. You're doing it now, Jin, mate. That's all. That's
Jin, listen. I muted you. I muted you because you are telling us all how mistreated you feel, and please make your points. If you have the room, take the room, and don't white knight the room, please.
Can we unmute Rumpus then, because he did nothing wrong?
You are misrepresenting.
Rumpus did totally. Rumpus sideswiped him, cut him off, and said he already knew his point. But let's let Jin actually make his point, and then if you already know it, if that's what your response wants to be fine. But there may be other people who haven't heard it. So Jin, go ahead and finish your point.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Right, I appreciate it. So basically, all I was trying to say was that when we tried to plot the light, the path of the light across the globe, Australia remains in the dark. And it's got nothing to do with refraction. It's because the Earth as a globe has not been proven. We measure no degree of curvature anywhere on this Earth, and the Earth indeed a flat plane. That is why we have what we have. Australia indeed is seeing the sun in 3 locations. You can't do that on the globe because of the curvature of the globe itself. That's why it doesn't work. I am now finished. That took 34 seconds. Thank you.
Right, it's quite simple. The point that he's making in that video is that 2 people on the opposite sides of the globe, one of them should be in the dark. They're more than, or 3 of them, whatever, that one of them should be in the dark. And the reason one of them is not that should be, if you took a 50-50 split of the sphere, is the refraction means that more than half of the globe is illuminated at any one time. It's as simple as that.
Okay, how is that happening?
By refraction, the Earth's atmosphere causes light to bend, which means that more than half of the Earth is illuminated at any one time, because the light bends down, it runs round the curve to some degree. And I described this about 10 minutes ago, or 5 minutes ago, that when we see the Earth, when we see the sun, the bottom of the sun touching the horizon, it's actually below the horizon due to refraction. So you are actually getting light from something effectively you do not have a geometric line of sight to, a straight line of sight. It's bent, and so that means that I think it's 55% or 60%, something like that, of the Earth is always illuminated. It's never 50-50, as you would expect. You know, if you just got a torch, a laser beam or something, and you've got a ball, it would only illuminate half of the ball. But if you had an atmosphere around the thing you were illuminating, and it bent the light, it would illuminate more of it. So the same thing happens with the Earth. So that's all this video points out. That basically it should be dark in a place that it's a bit light. I mean, it's not as though the bright sunshine. It just so happens that the sun hasn't quite dipped below the horizon in one of the locations, and this is used as a proof of the flat Earth. And it's not true. It's just down to refraction.
All right, the position the sun is seeing,
right. That took you 1 minute, 21 seconds. I'm going to require 1 minute, 21 seconds of a rebuttal. I didn't interrupt you. That's what I'm going to do now. That's my standard now. About to raise it. So
I like that. Now. I like that, bro. That way I know. 1 minute, 22 seconds. Go.
Yeah. So here we go. Right. So basically, because the Earth isn't a globe, is why you can't have light traveling around the globe. But it's as simple as that. The Earth is indeed a flat plane. That is why the sun can be seen from the 3 locations. When you plot that onto a globe with curvature now, the Earth's curvature gets in the way. Remember, we can see the sun in 3 locations. But when we plot that on the globe, it is not possible. Australia